The digital clock on Tamara Padi's dashboard read 1:27 a.m. as she pulled into her driveway in Stalybridge. July 7, 2021 had been like any other night. Finishing a late care visit, exchanging light conversation with her colleague who accompanied her home. Exhausted but fulfilled from helping others, Tamara had no idea that inside her quiet home, a phone alarm was set for 3:30 a.m. In the darkness of her house, Aubrey Padi lay waiting. Her ex-husband of 14 years hadn't come empty-handed. 2 kitchen knives, a hammer, gloves, a length of cord, a metal exercise bar. Each item carefully selected for what would unfold when that alarm finally buzzed. For months since their separation, Tamara had rebuilt her life, focusing on her thriving healthcare business and raising their 2 daughters, Tia and Mia. At 45, this South African native had already accomplished what many dream of, emigrating to a new country, earning a master's degree in law while raising children, and establishing a successful business. Her future stretched bright before her, but Aubrey couldn't accept her independence, couldn't tolerate that she had moved forward without him. As he lay there in the shadows of her home, his phone charging beside him, he had made a decision that would forever alter multiple lives. He'd even set an alarm so he could nap while waiting, a detail that would later chill investigators to their core. What drives someone to such calculated violence against a person they once claimed to love? What warning signs might have been missed in the weeks and months before? The story of Tamara Padi isn't just about one night of violence. It's about recognizing the dangerous patterns that build toward tragedy. Before we continue with Tamara's story, I'm curious, have you ever noticed concerning behavior in a friend's relationship but weren't sure if or how to intervene? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else recognize these crucial warning signs. Now let's go back to understand who Tamara was. Before she became a headline, before her ex-husband decided she deserved what he had meticulously planned for her. In 2004, Tamara Padi left the coastal neighborhoods of Escalation, Cape Town, with dreams larger than her suitcase could contain. South Africa had shaped her early years, but the United Kingdom would become the canvas for her greatest achievements. At the time of her arrival, few could have predicted the remarkable impact she would make in her adopted homeland. Those who knew Tamara described a woman whose presence transformed rooms. A lovely, bubbly, outgoing, professional woman, friends would later tell investigators. Her laugh, warm and genuine, became her signature, a sound that made others instinctively join in. This natural charisma served her well as she navigated life in a new country, building connections and establishing roots. What distinguished Tamara from many was her relentless pursuit of education despite mounting responsibilities. While raising her young daughters Tia and Mia, she enrolled in university. The late nights studying after putting her children to bed, the early mornings reviewing notes before school runs, these became her routine. Her determination culminated in a master's degree in law, an achievement that represented countless sacrifices and unwavering focus. She would study with Tia on her lap sometimes, recalled a university classmate. She'd be highlighting textbooks while helping with homework. I never once heard her complain about the workload. This same drive propelled Tamara into entrepreneurship. Recognizing a gap in health and social care services, she co-founded a business with Aubrey that quickly gained reputation for quality and compassion. Under her guidance, the company expanded, providing essential care to vulnerable community members. Her business approach mirrored her personal philosophy, putting people first and building relationships based on trust. Colleagues noted her exceptional ability to connect with clients, particularly those others found challenging. Tamara had this gift, one coworker explained. She could walk into a room with the most difficult client, and within minutes, they'd be chatting like old friends. But beyond her professional accomplishments, Tamara's greatest pride was her daughters. For Tia and Mia, their mother created a world of possibility and wonder. Despite work demands and study commitments, she remained fully present in their lives, attending school events, organizing birthday celebrations, and creating traditions that would become cherished memories. Tia, the older daughter, inherited her mother's quiet determination. Their bond transcended the typical mother-daughter relationship. They were confidants. "My mom wasn't just my parent," Tia would later say in a tribute. "She was my best friend. She always knew how to make me smile, even on my worst days." 11-year-old Mia, with her mother's infectious energy, found in Tamara an unwavering source of security. "My mom promised me I would never have a reason to cry," Mia recalled. "She loved me with her whole heart." Tamara's home reflected her vibrant personality, filled with photographs documenting family milestones, colorful artwork from her daughters, and mementos from South Africa. She maintained connections to her homeland through food, music, and regular calls with family, ensuring her daughters understood their heritage. By early 2021, Tamara had built an enviable life through sheer determination and talent. A respected professional with a thriving business, a devoted mother raising confident, loving daughters, a friend whose loyalty knew no bounds, a woman who had overcome the challenges of immigration to create something meaningful. What no one could see was how quickly this carefully constructed life would unravel, and how the very person who had witnessed her rise would orchestrate her fall. When Tamara first met Padi in South Africa, their connection seemed written in the stars. He was charming, attentive, and ambitious, qualities that aligned perfectly with her own drive. Their early relationship blossomed against the backdrop of shared dreams, building a life abroad, establishing a business, and raising a family together. When they married, those who attended spoke of the palpable joy between them, two people genuinely in love and looking toward a shared future. The first years of their marriage delivered on that promise. They navigated the challenges of relocating to the UK together, supporting each other through the inevitable adjustment period. They celebrated the birth of their daughters, Tia and later Mia, and took pride in creating a stable home. Photographs from this period show a seemingly perfect family, smiling faces at birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and school events. But beneath this carefully maintained image, subtle shifts were occurring. Friends later recalled how Aubrey's behavior changed gradually, so slowly that the transformation was difficult to pinpoint. What began as protective concern evolved into something more restrictive. His questions about Tamara's whereabouts became more frequent, his interest in her conversations with others more intense. He always needed to know who she was talking to, one friend would later tell investigators. At first, it seemed like normal interest, but then it became constant. As their health and social care business grew more successful, Aubrey's control extended to professional relationships. He began inserting himself into Tamara's client meetings, monitoring her work communications and questioning her decisions. Colleagues noticed how Tamara would check her phone constantly, responding immediately to his messages regardless of what she was doing. At home, the restrictions multiplied. Tamara's social circle narrowed as Aubrey found fault with various friends. Her visits to family in South Africa became less frequent. Even her clothing choices became subject to his approval. The vibrant, outspoken woman who had arrived in the UK began to dim her light, adjusting her behavior to avoid conflict. For Tamara, these changes happened so incrementally that each individual concession seemed minor, a small price for household peace. Only in retrospect would the pattern become clear, a systematic dismantling of her independence. The breaking point came after a particularly difficult period in late 2020. After 14 years together, Tamara made the painful decision to end the marriage in early 2021. She moved to a separate home with their daughters, attempting to create distance while maintaining civility for the children's sake and their shared business interests. Aubrey's initial reaction seemed measured, a facade that masked his internal rage. He presented himself as reasonable during custody exchanges and business meetings, but private messages told a different story. His texts oscillated between pleading for reconciliation and veiled threats. When persuasion failed, his tone darkened. "You think you can just leave? After everything I've done for you," read one message recovered from Tamara's phone. "You'll regret this decision." Despite the separation, their lives remained entangled. The shared business meant regular contact. The daughters provided another connection point. School events, medical appointments, and weekend exchanges all necessitated communication. Each interaction became an opportunity for Aubrey to reassert control, to remind Tamara that the separation was, in his mind, temporary. Friends noticed Tamara's anxiety spike before and after these encounters. She began changing her routines unpredictably, varying her routes home and adjusting her work schedule. Without explicitly saying so, she was implementing safety measures, though perhaps not comprehensive enough for the danger that was building. What Tamara couldn't have known was how separation often escalates risk in controlling relationships. Statistics show that women are at greatest danger when leaving controlling partners, the ultimate assertion of independence that controlling individuals cannot tolerate. As spring turned to summer in 2021, the warning signs multiplied. Aubrey began appearing unexpectedly at places Tamara frequented. Her home security camera captured him watching the house at night. The messages became more frequent, more demanding. The relationship that had begun with such promise had transformed into something dangerous, a reality Tamara was only beginning to fully comprehend as July approached. By June 2021, the invisible boundary lines Tamara had drawn around her new life began to collapse. Aubrey's presence expanded like a shadow, appearing in places he had no reason to be, watching from parked cars, showing up at her workplace unannounced. Neighbors would later report seeing his vehicle stationed outside her Stalybridge home at odd hours, engine off, lights dark. What had begun as occasional text messages transformed into a barrage of communication. His words cycled through a predictable pattern, apologies and promises of change, followed by accusations and blame, culminating in thinly veiled threats. When Tamara reduced her responsiveness, the intensity only increased. Would call her phone 20-30 times in a row, a colleague later testified. During client visits, her phone would constantly buzz. She started keeping it on silent, but you could see the anxiety on her face when she checked it. The digital surveillance extended beyond calls and texts. Tamara discovered Aubrey had gained access to her email account and social media profiles. Personal conversations with friends, appointment details, and even job inquiries were suddenly within his reach. This invasion stripped away her last vestiges of privacy, creating a suffocating awareness that her every move was being monitored. Friends noticed changes in Tamara's behavior. She spoke more quietly, checked over her shoulder frequently, and became hesitant to share details about her daily life. The vibrant woman who once commanded rooms with her presence now tried to make herself invisible. She changed her passwords, created new accounts, but the feeling of being watched persisted. On July 6, 2021, just one day before the murder, the situation escalated from psychological torment to physical violence. During a child custody exchange, Aubrey demanded to see Tamara's phone. When she refused, he struck her in the face with enough force to leave visible bruising. This assault occurred in a public place, with their children nearby. A significant boundary crossed. Despite the obvious danger, Tamara didn't report this incident to authorities. Like many victims of domestic abuse, she may have feared escalation, disbelief, or disruption to her children's lives. Instead, she confided in a close friend, who urged her to seek protection. "I'll be fine," she assured her concerned friend. "He's just trying to scare me." That evening, Tamara received what would be the final threatening message from Aubrey. "You think this is over? I'm not done with you yet." The words sat unanswered on her phone as she prepared for her night shift as a carer. What Tamara couldn't have known was that Aubrey had already moved beyond threats. He had purchased weapons, planned his entry into her home, and calculated the timing of his attack. The punch the day before wasn't an impulsive act of anger. It was a precursor to his meticulously planned violence. As Tamara went about her evening on July 6th, helping vulnerable clients and making plans for her daughter's upcoming birthday, Aubrey was gathering the tools he would use to end her life. The distance between threat and action had collapsed to nothing. I want to pause here and ask you, the viewer, if you noticed these warning signs in a friend's relationship, the constant calls, the surveillance, the isolation, the escalating threats, what would you do? Would you recognize these as danger signals or dismiss them as relationship problems? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your awareness might help someone in a similar situation before it's too late. Now let's examine the events of July 7th. The night Aubrey's planning culminated in an act of calculated violence that would forever change multiple lives. July 7, 2021 began as an ordinary Wednesday. For Tamara, it meant another night shift providing care to clients across Manchester. For Aubrey, it marked the culmination of a plan weeks in the making. As evening approached, Aubrey methodically gathered his supplies. Into a black backpack, he placed 2 kitchen knives with serrated edges, weapons chosen for maximum damage. He added a hammer, a metal pull-up exercise bar, a length of cord, and a pair of gloves. Each item served a specific purpose in his plan. The gloves would prevent fingerprints. The cord could restrain. The varied weapons offered options. Around 10 p.m., Aubrey drove to Tamara's neighborhood in Stalybridge. He parked several streets away to avoid detection and approached her home on foot. Security footage from a neighbor's camera briefly captured his silhouette moving through the shadows, backpack slung over his shoulder. Using a key he had secretly kept after their separation, Aubrey entered Tamara's home. The house was empty. Tamara still at work, the children staying with a family friend that night. He moved through the familiar rooms with practiced ease, eventually positioning himself in a storage space where he could remain hidden until the right moment. Then, he did something that would later shock investigators. He set an alarm on his phone for 3:30 a.m. This single detail revealed the calculated nature of his plan. He wasn't acting on impulse or rage. He was executing a strategy so methodical that he could even allow himself to sleep while waiting for his victim. At approximately 1:30 a.m., Tamara returned home with a colleague who had accompanied her on the late-night care visits. Unaware of the danger lurking in their midst, the 2 women chatted quietly in the kitchen before heading to their respective rooms. Tamara's colleague would be staying overnight in the guest room due to the late hour, a coincidence that would later prove crucial. For 2 hours, the house remained quiet. Tamara fell into exhausted sleep after her shift. Her colleague dozed in the guest room, and Aubrey waited, his phone charging beside him, the alarm set to wake him at the precise moment he had determined would be optimal for his attack. At 3:30 a.m., the alarm vibrated. Aubrey silenced it quickly, then gathered his weapons and moved toward Tamara's bedroom. The house was completely silent as he pushed open her door. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, he could see her sleeping form, vulnerable and unaware. What happened next was described in court as sadistic, coldly calculating, and brutal. Aubrey first attacked Tamara with the metal exercise bar, striking her repeatedly with enough force to cause significant trauma. The sudden assault woke Tamara, who attempted to defend herself, her screams muffled by Aubrey's gloved hand. Not satisfied with this initial attack, Aubrey then left the room momentarily, a pause that prosecutors would later describe as deliberately prolonging Tamara's terror. He returned with one of the kitchen knives and proceeded to stab her 8 times, targeting vital areas with precision. Throughout this horrific attack, Tamara's colleague slept in the adjacent room, the sounds of the assault not loud enough to wake her. This detail would haunt her in the months to come, the knowledge that help was so close, yet unaware. After completing his attack, Aubrey gathered his belongings and fled the scene. Blood spattered and breathing heavily, he returned to his vehicle and drove away from Stalybridge. His plan executed, he now faced the reality of what he had done. It wasn't until approximately 4:15 a.m. that Tamara's colleague was awakened by unusual sounds. Concerned, she went to check on Tamara and discovered the horrific scene. Tamara lay grievously wounded, blood soaking the bedding and floor. Despite her shock, the colleague immediately called emergency services, her panicked voice describing the situation to dispatchers. Paramedics arrived within minutes, finding Tamara clinging to life despite catastrophic injuries. They worked frantically to stabilize her, establishing IV lines and applying pressure to the multiple wounds. As they loaded her into the ambulance, her vital signs were already dangerously weak. At Manchester Royal Infirmary, medical teams continued the fight to save Tamara. Surgeons worked to repair the damage from multiple stab wounds, but the injuries proved too severe. Despite their best efforts, Tamara Padi was pronounced dead later that morning. A vibrant life extinguished by calculated violence. Back at the crime scene, police established a perimeter around the house. Forensic teams in white protective suits moved methodically through the rooms, documenting evidence and collecting samples. Detectives interviewed neighbors, seeking any information about unusual activity during the night. As morning broke over Stalybridge, the investigation into Tamara's murder was already accelerating. But the perpetrator was about to make their job unexpectedly straightforward. As dawn broke over Manchester on July 7th, Tamara Padi sat in his car on a quiet roadside, blood still fresh on his clothing. The adrenaline that had fueled his attack was fading, replaced by a strange calm. He picked up his phone and dialed emergency services, not to seek help for Tamara, but to confess. The call connected to an ambulance control center operator who would later describe the conversation as chilling. Aubrey spoke with unsettling composure, detailing what he had done and where police could find him. Then came the statement that would echo through courtrooms and news reports. "I am sorry for what I have done, but she deserved it." This single sentence revealed the twisted justification behind his actions, a belief that Tamara's desire for independence somehow warranted her death. He concluded the call by stating his intention to take his own life, though he made no actual attempt to do so. Police located and arrested Aubrey within hours of his call. He offered no resistance, maintaining the same eerily detached demeanor noted by the emergency operator. At the police station, officers observed no signs of remorse or distress as he was processed, photographed, and placed in a cell. The investigation proceeded with unusual clarity. Forensic evidence from the crime scene matched Aubrey's DNA. The weapons recovered contained his fingerprints, despite his use of gloves. Security footage tracked his movements before and after the murder. His phone records revealed the 3:30 a.m. alarm and his location throughout the night. Most damning was his own confession, recorded by emergency services and later played in court. Prosecutors would describe the case as open and shut, a rare instance where the evidence left no room for doubt or alternative explanations. In Manchester Crown Court, Tamara Padi stood trial for murder in late 2021. The proceedings revealed the full extent of his premeditation and the brutality of his attack. Forensic experts testified about the multiple weapons used and the deliberate nature of the wounds. Tamara's colleague recounted discovering the horrific scene and her desperate attempts to save her friend. Throughout the trial, Aubrey showed little emotion, occasionally taking notes but never reacting to the graphic evidence presented. His defense team attempted to argue for a reduced charge based on diminished responsibility, but psychiatric evaluations found him fully aware of his actions and their consequences. When the verdict came, it was unanimous: guilty of murder in the first degree. At sentencing, Judge Patrick Field QC delivered remarks that laid bare the true nature of Aubrey's crime. "You waited in the house for your wife to return from a late-night care visit, knowing that your daughter slept in the adjoining bedroom," the judge stated. "So clear and considered were your intentions, you even set your phone alarm, giving yourself a chance to sleep and ensuring that your wife would be asleep before you attacked her." The judge addressed Aubrey's claim that Tamara deserved it, stating, "Your conversation is full of self-pity, justification for your conduct. Like so much violence against women, you tried to place the blame upon the victim, suggesting that she had wronged you and that you were driven to this conduct. There are no excuses, and no fault lies with the victim, Tamara. Perhaps most powerful was the judge's question, and what type of parental love is it that lies alongside your child while waiting to murder her mother? The sentence reflected the gravity of the crime. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years before possibility of parole. At 46 years old, Aubrey would be nearly 70 before he could even be considered for release. As he was led from the courtroom, Aubrey maintained the same emotionless expression he had shown throughout the proceedings, a final indication of his complete lack of remorse for destroying the life of the woman who had once shared his dreams. In the wake of Tamara's murder, the most profound devastation fell upon her daughters, Tia and Mia. In a single night, the girls lost both parents, one to death, the other to imprisonment. The foundation of their world had been violently dismantled, leaving them adrift in grief and confusion. The morning after the murder, police officers and social workers faced the heartbreaking task of informing the girls about their mother's death. Tia, then 15, received the news with stunned silence, while 11-year-old Mia collapsed in tears. The additional revelation that their father was responsible created a complex trauma few children ever experience, mourning a parent while processing the betrayal by another. In the immediate aftermath, the girls were placed with a close friend of Tamara's who provided emergency care. This temporary arrangement, while necessary, added another layer of displacement during their most vulnerable moment. Their belongings remained in the house, now marked as a crime scene, inaccessible for weeks as investigators gathered evidence. The tragedy's timing created a particularly poignant moment just days after the murder. On July 16th, Tia celebrated her 16th birthday, a milestone her mother had been planning to mark with a special celebration. Instead, it became what family spokesperson Samkelwa Setosa described as the saddest birthday that she'll ever have. During a video call that day, family members in South Africa witnessed the profound grief etched on Tia's face. The grief in her face was evident when I video called her this morning to wish her a beautiful day, Thasasa recalled. I just burst into tears the minute I put the phone down. The sisters processed their grief differently. Tia, described as reserved like her father had once been, turned inward, speaking little about her feelings. Mia, who inherited her mother's expressive nature, moved between moments of childlike normalcy and overwhelming sorrow. Both girls began therapy, but healing from such profound trauma would clearly be a long-term journey. As weeks passed, a more permanent care solution became urgent. Tamara's sister Lulama Mantuyedwa volunteered to adopt both girls and bring them to South Africa. This would connect them with extended family and their cultural heritage. However, international adoption processes and COVID-19 travel restrictions created significant hurdles. We will never rest until we put those girls to our chest and cry together physically, Setosa explained, voicing the family's determination to reunite with the children. The separation was made more painful by cultural considerations around mourning. In South African tradition, a deceased person's belongings must be handled with specific rituals. In our culture, we believe that the deceased's clothes need to be washed and stored in a dignified manner, Setosa explained. Yet COVID restrictions prevented family members from traveling to perform these important customs. The family's greatest fear was that bureaucratic complications might result in the girls entering the UK foster care system permanently. Now the family fear that the two children will end up in an orphanage, reported local media, highlighting the additional trauma this would create for children already suffering unimaginable loss. As the legal processes crawled forward, Tia and Mia remained in limbo, physically safe but emotionally adrift, their future uncertain in a country that now held their most painful memories. Tamara's murder represents a devastating pattern recognized by domestic violence experts worldwide. The period of separation from a controlling partner is statistically the most dangerous time for victims. Research consistently shows that 75% of domestic homicides occur during or after a victim leaves the relationship, a stark statistic that contradicts the common question, why didn't she just leave? This heightened risk exists because separation represents the ultimate loss of control for abusers. When victims assert independence, abusers often escalate tactics to regain dominance. What begins as monitoring behavior can progress to threats, then physical violence, and ultimately, in cases like Tamara's, to homicide. The progression typically follows recognizable stages. First comes isolation, cutting victims off from support networks that might offer perspective or assistance. Next is monitoring and controlling daily activities, from checking phone messages to dictating clothing choices. Financial control often follows, limiting access to resources that could enable independence. Verbal and emotional abuse erodes self-confidence, making victims doubt their perceptions and decisions. These behaviors create a foundation where physical violence becomes the next logical step in maintaining control. The first physical incident rarely appears without warning. It emerges from an established pattern of psychological domination. Economic factors frequently complicate these situations. In Tamara's case, the shared business created ongoing contact points that Aubrey exploited. Many victims remain in dangerous relationships due to financial entanglement, housing insecurity, or concerns about supporting children alone. These practical considerations can outweigh even serious safety concerns. Societal expectations also play a role. Many cultures emphasize family preservation at all costs, placing responsibility for relationship success primarily on women. This creates pressure to tolerate increasingly dangerous behavior for the sake of maintaining family unity. The most critical insight from Tamara's case is how controlling behaviors serve as warning signs for potential violence. Aubrey's monitoring of Tamara's communications, restrictions on her independence, and escalating anger after separation were textbook precursors to violence. The physical assault the day before the murder represented a critical warning that tragically did not lead to intervention. Understanding these patterns is essential for both potential victims and bystanders. Recognizing early warning signs, excessive jealousy, isolation attempts, monitoring behaviors, can prompt intervention before violence occurs. For those already experiencing abuse, understanding the heightened risk during separation can inform safety planning. Tamara's story illustrates how domestic violence rarely appears without warning. Instead, it develops through escalating patterns of control that, when recognized early, provide opportunities for life-saving intervention. Preventing tragedies like Tamara's requires a multi-layered approach that combines individual awareness, community support, and institutional response. While no single strategy can eliminate domestic violence entirely, comprehensive prevention efforts can save lives. Education forms the foundation of prevention. Teaching young people about healthy relationships helps them recognize concerning behaviors before they escalate. School programs that address consent, communication, and conflict resolution provide essential tools for building respectful relationships. For adults, workplace training can highlight warning signs and appropriate responses when colleagues show signs of abuse. For those already experiencing control or violence, support services offer critical lifelines. National domestic violence hotlines provide 24/7 crisis intervention, safety planning, and referrals to local resources. These confidential services can guide victims through their options without pressure or judgment. Many communities also offer emergency shelter, counseling, and legal advocacy specifically designed for domestic violence survivors. Legal interventions play a crucial role in protection. Restraining orders, while imperfect, create legal consequences for continued contact. Family courts can establish custody arrangements that prioritize safety during separation. Specialized domestic violence courts in many jurisdictions offer comprehensive services and monitoring to reduce reoffending. Technology has created new tools for safety. Multiple apps now allow users to alert trusted contacts in emergencies, document abuse patterns, and connect with resources. Some provide disguised interfaces that won't alert abusers if discovered on the victim's phone. Community engagement strengthens these formal systems. Faith communities, cultural organizations, and neighborhood groups can create environments where victims feel safe disclosing abuse. When communities openly discuss domestic violence, they reduce stigma and isolation that often keep victims silent. For those concerned about someone's relationship, direct support makes a difference. Offering specific help rather than general advice, "I can drive you to appointments," rather than "you should leave," provides practical assistance without judgment. Maintaining connection with someone experiencing isolation can be life-saving, creating a bridge to eventual safety. What resources exist in your community for domestic violence prevention and intervention? Have you noticed billboards, community centers, or organizations addressing this issue? Share what you've seen in the comments. Your awareness might help someone identify local support they didn't know existed. Tamara Padi was far more than the tragic circumstances of her death. She was a woman who crossed oceans to build a better life, who earned advanced degrees while raising children, who created a successful business serving vulnerable people. She was a mother whose daughters described her as their best friend, a colleague whose laugh brightened difficult days, a friend whose loyalty never wavered. My mom was a happy, outgoing soul who always knew how to put a smile on my face, Dia shared in her tribute. She wasn't just my mother. She was my confidant, my role model, my strength. Mia's words captured her mother's protective nature. She promised me I would never have a reason to cry. She loved me with her whole heart. Friends described a woman who made everyone feel special. Tamara was a friend and sister to anyone who knew her, one wrote. She filled rooms with her joy. Her presence was contagious. You couldn't help but feel better when she was around. These tributes paint a portrait of a remarkable woman whose life should be celebrated even as we acknowledge the circumstances of her death. Tamara's legacy lives on not only in memories, but in the lessons her story offers. Judge Nichols' words at Aubrey's sentencing offer a powerful reminder. No woman should have to endure at the hands of a man what Tamara did in her final hours. This statement places responsibility squarely where it belongs, not on victims for failing to leave, but on perpetrators who choose violence and the systems that fail to intervene. For those currently experiencing controlling relationships, Tamara's story underscores the importance of reaching out. Confide in trusted friends, contact domestic violence services, document concerning behaviors, create safety plans. These actions aren't overreactions, they're appropriate responses to genuine danger. For those witnessing concerning relationships, speak up, offer specific support, maintain connection. Your presence might provide the crucial lifeline someone needs to reach safety. Tamara Padi's life mattered, her achievements mattered, her love for her daughters mattered. By learning from her story and taking action, whether through supporting domestic violence services, educating ourselves about warning signs, or intervening when we see concerning behaviors, we honor her memory in the most meaningful way possible. We cannot change what happened to Tamara, but through awareness, education, and action, we can work toward a future where such tragedies become increasingly rare. A future where women can leave controlling relationships without paying the ultimate price for their freedom.